Hey, welcome everyone. We're very excited to have you all here as we dive into one of the most crucial decisions for any QA and engineering team, which is choosing the right testing infrastructure. Now, whether you're testing a mobile app, a web app, or enterprise software, your infrastructure plays a very major role in speed, coverage, security, as well as your cost effectiveness. So, in this session, we will majorly be talking about the various mobile testing and lab deployment models. We'll break down the key factors to consider when choosing a testing infrastructure, the real world challenges, and how to choose between public cloud, private cloud, or a hybrid approach. So, let's get started. Can we move to the next slide, please? So I'll just introduce you to the speakers of the session today. We have with us Bhavin Doshi. Bhavin is the Director of Product and Program Management at BrowserStack. With a deep understanding of product engineering and operations, Bhavin works towards enhancing scalability, reliability, and cost effectiveness across testing platforms. He believes in a pragmatic approach to problem solving, balancing technical excellence and execution rigor to deliver impactful outcomes. Then we have me, Ayushi Bajpayee. I am a product manager at BrowserStack. I am leading the private cloud offering with a focus on scaling the solution and addressing critical customer challenges in testing. I'm passionate about enhancing the testing experience for enterprise worldwide. Before getting started, I just wanted to walk us through a few housekeeping items, which is today's session will run for 60 minutes. This session is being recorded. All participants will be muted to enable the speakers to engage without any interruptions. The recordings will be made available to you all, to all the attendees post the session, and a dedicated Q&A will be taken up at the end of the session. Please use the Zoom Q&A window to send in your questions. With this, before getting started, we'll request you all to please participate in the upcoming polls so that we can get a pulse of the testing preferences and the journey of this audience. This will help us deliver a more targeted session.
Thank you so much, Ayushi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in early this morning for this webinar. Uh, and Ayushi, also thank you for so kind, so much of kind words for me in introducing me. Yes, I am the director of product and program management at BrowserStack, and today we are here to go through a very important decision that most of you face while you are working on deciding how to test your mobile apps, right? So if you want to scale your infrastructure, if you want to ensure that you are delivering faster, what is that you are going to do? Which approach is that you're going to take to ensure that you deliver a quality product and experience to your customers? And that decision, we are hopeful that at the end of this webinar, you would have good takeaways to help you decide what would be the right solution for you. Right. So we'll start with mobile testing, like why it is important and what are the different kinds of deployment models, and we call it lab deployment models that currently companies around the world employ. Then we move on to three key factors that you need to consider when selecting whether you want to go with a public cloud or a private cloud or a hybrid approach for your testing needs. And we end with a closing note and then we move on to Q&A. During the entire presentation, at any point in time, if you have any questions, feel free to post that on the webinar Q&A option. We will see if we can answer as many as possible during the presentation itself, but we have a dedicated Q&A time at the end of the webinar to address your queries, so we can use that as well, right? On that note, let's move on to the next slide. I think most of you would relate to this horror story, right? You wake up in the morning and you want to book a cab for your flight at the airport, and imagine you're not able to book that cab. Or the markets are about to start and you want to log in your trades and you aren't able to log in your trade. You have your kid somewhere in a crash or a daycare center, and you're not able to monitor your kid, yeah, via the webcam. Or you want to navigate to some place where you haven't been and your maps isn't working, or you want to just relax, watch a series and Netflix is down, right? This is a true new world horror story that we all live in and we experience. And the moment there's lack of internet or the apps are crashing around you, you feel the pain and the pinch really there. We see a lot of people posting about digital detox online. Mind you, they are also using a cell phone to actually post that. So cell phones and its usage has increased dramatically, and a lot of day-to-day activities are now driven via cell phone. So if we move on to the next slide, I want to focus on the fact that why mobile testing is critical today. You guys are here today in this webinar really just validates the thought that yes, mobile testing is critical today. The question really is why? And the simplest answer is the users have shifted from desktop usage to mobile usage. What we used to see as a trend in the last century and towards the end of last century, that is actually flipped over to mobile. You This is just statistics from Statista. You can Everyone can find this online. We are expecting to hit a 6,000 million users, mobile users worldwide by end of 2029, which means the number of users that you would see for your products is just going to increase exponentially. And that means that you have to ensure a quality product is delivered and the best user experience is given to your users when it comes to mobile app or web app, which is used on mobile. Uh, Fragmentation again is a big challenge. Now, say we had just two OEMs or three OEMs building devices for the users. It would still have been easier for you to test and validate whether your apps are working fine, your experience is not hurting, and you're giving a good quality product to your customers. But in today's world, you have hundreds of OEMs who manufacture thousands of different models every single day, and the number of OS and the versions of OS keep changing. So these combinations define the fragmentation in the market, which means that you cannot rely on testing one particular combination and assume that all your users will get the same experience. You need to ensure that you monitor the traffic on your app, understand where the user demographics is, understand what kind of device OS combinations are being used by your users, and then decide what you want to test on. And that fragmentation becomes a key reason why you need to test or mobile apps on the different mobiles together. And lastly, with the changing business needs and the kind of economical conditions that we see, things have to move fast. You have to be agile. You have to be on your toes, which means requirements will come in, requirements will change every single day, and you need to adapt to it and you need to be able to deliver that change in your product to ensure that you keep up at the pace of the business and your business is not hurt because you were late in delivering something, which means you want faster release cycles. And for that, again, testing your products on mobile becomes super critical. But this doesn't come with its own set of challenges. If you want to test on mobile, there are things that you need to do now. Manual testing also has its own challenges, like a lot of discussions that I have with fellow team members or industry experts. Some of them do mention that, oh, if you're doing manual testing, there are no challenge as such, but manual testing also poses its own challenge. So doesn't really matter that you are doing manual testing or automation testing. So it doesn't matter whether you're testing on fewer devices or you're testing on a large number of devices, whether you are testing sequentially or whether you are testing parallelly, there are challenges in terms of cost because you need to invest not only on devices, but also people who would maintain those devices. You have to invest in scaling those devices, and Ayush is going to cover in the presentation later on as to what that scalability challenges are. Maintainability. Say you have an in-house lab and you want to maintain that lab. You need to divert your focus from an individual who just needs to test an app to someone who actually knows how to set up the network to allow phones to be set up as a lab in the office. Right now, that's a investment that is very different from your core requirement. Why would you want to spend effort in that? Why would you want to spend cost or like money in terms of building that? leave that to the experts and focus only on the thing that you need to do. Maintaining security, all of these challenges are something which are very crucial in deciding how you want to test, and it becomes a hurdle for scaling your test infra. And cloud solutions do offer an alternate, but there are again various different models in which you can operate. So before we move ahead in terms of what factors affect, we would want to focus on understanding and get the terminologies right in terms of what different deployment models are there. So if we move on to the next slide, we've kept it very simple. Mobile testing infra deployment models, you can keep it as or broadly classify as on-prem and cloud. On-prem is anything that you have in office on your premise. And this on-prem cloud setups or on-prem device setups can further have classifications. Now, I'm not saying that these are the only classification. There are few more edge cases that would have a different model that would come out, but the implementation or the market share of that model technically is not that high. So we're focusing on the ones that are majoritarily used across the globe. So in an on-prem setup, you have companies who have their own devices, but they are self-managed loose devices. When I say loose devices, you just have a bunch of devices in your office, which you use at will to test and just go ahead and say deploy your app, uh, and test your devices or test your apps on that. There is strict, there are issues there when you are talking about self-managed use devices, not just about cost, but about consistency of environment. Say, imagine you have a team of few testers, 10 to 20, and one of the developers upgraded the OS. And the other developer actually wanted to test on the previous generation of the OS on which the device was. You lose out the opportunity to have that device OS combination to test it on. Now, having that consistency, someone made a change in the setting and enabled dark mode across the device, and you wanted to test it on the light mode. Every time you go ahead and start the device, you need to then ensure that you are setting up the environment right before you start the test. So the loose devices are dependent on individuals, dependent on the users to allow you to do the testing in the right way. So there are challenges that come by itself. Then you have self-managed device labs. These are for companies generally larger in size, but they want to build a device lab in-house. And they themselves invest in not just buying the devices, but also setting up a lab. Then you also have cases where there are vendor-managed device labs, but they are on-prem. Uh, but the good part is that we also have a cloud solution for this. And you have two kinds of clouds. You have your public cloud and you have your private cloud. Your public cloud is like your likes of Amazon's or Azure's or GCP, where you are using a shared infra with a customer. So you log in to a public cloud, you get a device allocated, you complete your tests, and you release the device back into the pool, which is then allocated to the next customer who wants to test on the same device. We'll come on addressing security concerns, etc. And Ayush is going to walk you through those factors. So I'm not diving deeper into that. And then is private cloud. Now, the private cloud is where there are companies or individuals who are concerned about security. There are companies who want to test some very specific use cases. All of those are really met with private cloud setup. Private cloud setup means that the devices are dedicated for you, and there are different level of privacy in the private cloud that can happen, and Ayushi will cover that as well. But this is the gist of all the deployment models that you see in the market, and the most widely used deployment models. There could be a combination of these. There could be a hybrid cloud approach as well. There could be a hybrid of on-prem and cloud approach as well, which people use. But these are the broad level categories of the deployment models. With this, I'll hand over to Ayushi to walk us through the different factors that needs to be considered while selecting a cloud solution in particular. So if we can move on to the next slide, and Ayushi, I'll let you take over from here.
Cool. So thank you so much, Bhavin, for that introduction. Now we majorly want to talk about the key factors to consider when choosing this infrastructure. So the first factor, and one of the most important factors, is scalability and cost considerations. Can we please move to the next slide? So what do we, so first of all, let's start with scalability. One of the primary reasons organizations move to cloud is scalability. And what do we mean by that is, simply put, scalability is the ability to grow and shrink your testing capacity as needed, which is whether you need 100 tests a day or you need 100,000 tests, your infrastructure should be able to handle that demand without any bottleneck. So, what are the key aspects of scalability? Uh, First, being coverage. Do you have access to all the devices, OS versions, browsers that your customers use? Second, being on demand scale. That is, can you spin up additional resources when needed, or are you limited by a fixed scale? Uptime and stability, which is downtime means a lot of loss in productivity. So, is your testing infrastructure available when you need it? And the last being team location impact. Is your team globally distributed, and whether your infrastructure is accessible to your teams across regions without latency issues? These are the key aspects to consider when we look at scalability. And the next factor, and a very major one, is the cost. A lot of us assume that we can just buy a phone and test, but there's so much more to that. We need to consider the device cost, which is maintaining a fleet of devices keeps getting expensive over time. We need to consider DevOps stacks, which is who will maintain and troubleshoot this infrastructure. There is a continuous investment, which is new devices, OS and OS versions, security updates. All of these factors make it an ongoing expense, which brings us to the total cost of ownership, which is the real cost is not just about your hardware. It includes the management, the automation, the maintenance, the compliance that comes with managing these devices. So, to summarize, with a private cloud, what you get is a dedicated infrastructure for consistent performance. You get higher upfront costs, but predictable long term expenses. An example of that would be a startup, say, with fluctuating needs. They can benefit from a public cloud's flexibility without those heavy investments early on. But as their volume grows, the rising cost of usage, it can become a concern, which makes private cloud a better long-term investment in such scenarios. Can we please move to the next slide? Next factor to consider when looking at your infrastructure needs would be the edge cases, and the features in consideration. So talking about the edge cases, situations that aren't really covered by a standard functional testing, but they are very significant and have a significant impact on a real world user experience. For example, they are specific, less common scenarios that can cause failure in production. And edge cases are actually more relevant to cloud solutions, whether self managed or vendor managed solutions. So, why do these edge cases matter? Because your users don't follow a happy path. Ensuring your app functions correctly in a real world scenario is extremely critical. And a list of the most common edge cases that we've encountered would be environment pre-configuration, which is, say, some of your apps require specific system settings which are otherwise not accessible on public cloud. Or your state or data retention across sessions, which is what happens when a user logs out and logs back in. Do you need to repeat the entire test setup that you performed the last time? If yes, then state and data retention across sessions is an important factor when considering your test infrastructure. Next being usage of production data like payment cards. So some test cases actually require us to test real payment flows and require us to use real production data like payment cards, which is one of the edge cases. And then next being Bluetooth pairing, which is very critical for IoT wearables. automotive apps, again, falls in a very niche and edge case category. Another very important edge case scenario would be the MDM, or a mobile device management configuration, which is very important for a lot of enterprise applications trying to test for apps behind local environments. So, to summarize, if your app needs special configurations and checks in any of these edge case boxes, then private cloud might be a more reliable and a more suitable testing infrastructure platform for you. Moving on to the next slide. The third consideration to keep in mind is the security and compliance needs. So, security is a very priority item, especially for industries like finance, healthcare, telecom. There are key security considerations like your international standards, which is compliance with GDPR, SOC 2, etc. But apart from this, there are other security aspects which can be a requirement for your very specific testing needs. The difference between a shared versus a dedicated infrastructure when it comes to the security aspects would be one, your device level security, which is private cloud devices eliminate the risk of device level residual data altogether. Then you have your host level security, which is there is an option to have private host machines for hosting these real devices in the labs. Then you have network security, which is ensuring your network data isolation completely. And another factor would be SIM card security, which is ensuring the use of dedicated SIM cards for secure testing environments. So, public cloud versus private cloud when it comes to security and compliance. Again, if your requirement is to have a greater control over security policies and compliance or regulatory environments, then private cloud seems a much better fit for your requirements. Um, Moving on to the next slide. So we come to the important question here, which is what do we choose? That we've explored public and private cloud options. The question is, do you need to choose one? How do you choose? And is hybrid approach the right option for you? So many organizations use hybrid approach to get the best of both worlds. And how does a hybrid model work? So basically, what we do is we use public cloud for your exploratory and functional testing, which is the need to test across multiple device OS combinations. And to ensure a much broader coverage, you use the public cloud offering versus you use private cloud for your regression, edge cases, security sensitive tests, wherein you need a stable and a more controlled environment. Their private cloud ensures you the right reliability and the security aspects. An example would be a gaming company, which uses public cloud to test compatibility across a wide range of devices, but uses private cloud for performance sensitive and security sensitive tests. So, by combining both, they are optimizing for cost, coverage, as well as security. With this, I will hand it over to Bhavin for the summary and the end notes. Yeah, Bhavin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ayushi, for walking us through the different factors that we need to consider while choosing between public or private cloud. Obviously, public or private, it's not a one shoe fits all kind of a solution. So no deployment model is. Every organization is unique. Every organization is different, and the testing requirements are different because what they are offering as a product to their customers is different, which means that you need to consider all the factors in totality and prioritize, stack rank what is more critical for your organization, which will give you an answer as to which particular model works best for you. And that is what you go with. Hybrid, which Ayushi talked about, generally is a best approach for most of the large organizations to ensure that they are able to scale their testing infra at a lower cost and are able to achieve the consistency that they require across the testing space, testing infra. If you can move on to the next slide, what I'm going to do is just summarize, first of all these factors that we just went through, and then also walk you guys through a checklist which you can use in your organizations to determine which deployment model works really best for you. What we covered is coverage, which is an important factor. Again, like Ayushi explained, this is really, really critical. If you have limited number of device OS combinations that you want to test from, public cloud becomes the right place. But if you need very specific device OS combinations, that I want a very specific OEM model on a very specific version of the OS, then private cloud becomes the most suitable solution for you. Scalability and uptime for public cloud is generally guaranteed upwards of 99%. In private cloud, it depends on the number of devices. So this is very critical to understand that if you say have a 10 private devices in your cloud, so private cloud setup, even if one of the device goes down, it means the availability of your private cloud setup is 90%. If two devices go down for any reason, the availability is 80%. Now, the important point here is two things. One is, why would the device go down? Now, the device goes down for multiple reasons. Mobile devices aren't cloud native infra, which means that they're not built to be hosted on cloud, but we are working on enabling that capability. So teams don't need to work on building the capabilities in-house. So in doing so, because you are making it go against its nature, there are certain issues that can crop up which could lead to issues. Then there is cleanup of the devices, especially say in public cloud when the device is hosted and it's a shared infra. So you use a device to run a session, and then you leave that device for the next and send it back to the pool. We need to ensure that that device is completely cleaned before it is assigned to the next user. And the same on-demand cleanup can be done on private cloud as well. So when you're cleaning up the device for that period of time, the device isn't available. So for that moment, the uptime can be considered as low. So in private cloud, the uptime is not 99%. It's not guaranteed. It depends on the number of devices that you have in your private cloud lab. Then you have edge case support. Ayushi walked us through a lot of these edge cases that are a critical factors to decide whether public cloud is required or private cloud is required. By the way, at BrowserStack, we strive to ensure that we have as many features and edge cases possible covered in the public cloud itself. So you don't have to opt for a private cloud, but there are certain cases which cannot be solved on public cloud, which for which private cloud is important. Security and compliance, public cloud adheres to SOC 2 Type 2 GDPR certifications, which gives that assurance to the customers that there is a high level of security standards being maintained. The data centers that are being used, for example, are tier 3 and tier 4 data centers, which are the highest security standards are maintained in these DCs. But private cloud would be required when you have even stringent security and compliance needs set up by your organizations. Simple examples would be, say, banks. So at BrowserStack, for example, there are banks who require by their security team to not have any shared infra, which means that it is not just the devices that they cannot share, but even the host machines to which these devices are connected, that cannot be shared at all. So if you fall into any of these categories, this is something that you need to consider while choosing public versus private. Now, if you move to the next slide, you will see a simple checklist that I've made. And again, this could be expanded further based on more requirements. But these are the most common use cases that we see and the most common questions that come to us in understanding whether we want to go with in-house labs or just buy the devices and test it or use public cloud or private cloud or hybrid setup. I'll just do a quick walkthrough of this before we jump onto the Q&A. If you're a small startup, and the team is co-located and you just need to test on handful of devices. In-house device, which is loose device setup that we talked about, should just work fine for you. But at the same time, public cloud also works equally fine for you. Right. But if you're a startup with fluctuating testing needs that Ayushi spoke about, that you at some point in time when the delivery is closer, you need to test on more number of devices. But during rest of the times for the regression runs that you want to do, or just a weekly check that you want to do on the app, you want to test on fewer devices. Then the fluctuating need shouldn't lead to an additional cost of devices and maintaining those devices at your end. That's where the public cloud becomes the right choice for you, right? You have teams that are spread across different locations. So in-house lab, which is available on cloud. So in-house lab, people confuse it with something that you put in a room versus something that is put in a room but is available and accessible to people from different locations. So if I'm talking about this latter part, so if you have in-house lab or a public cloud, this definitely works because you don't need to worry about having the devices shipped from one location to another. If you have edge cases that are important to you as a part of the user journey, this is something that will be leading you to use either the device lab or in-house labs or private cloud or a hybrid cloud, right? Uh, Same goes for cost factors, security concerns. Business is growing and you need to scale rapidly. You want to test on specific device OS combinations. You want to test on custom devices. You want extreme low latencies for some use cases. Want uptime guarantee or assurance on your infra. You want to set up test environments. Don't want to set up test environment every single time. So the pre-configuration that Ayushi spoke about, that certain system setting has to be in a certain way before you start the test, right? You don't want you want to maintain the state of the device or the data across the test session. So these are different questions that you need to ask, and there could be more which you need to ask, but these are the most common ones that we see coming to decide whether you want to just buy the device or you want to build an in-house lab or you want to invest in buying a public cloud or a private cloud or a hybrid cloud license. Obviously, the buying of devices and in-house lab comes with a cost and that needs to be considered. Move on to the Q&A, where I can see a few questions already on the Q&A tab. First question is how international compliance can work with BrowserStack. We are GDPR and SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. Uh, if you need more compliance details, we have an open portal where you can log in and you can understand about what security standards and compliance we adhere to. If there's any specific compliance needs that you have, you can obviously let us know, connect with us, and we'll be more than happy to answer whether or how we can achieve the compliance. Right? The next question is how do you track device health, uptime, and performance in real time? Oh, that's a really good question, Sudeep. Uh, the lab that we have built, we believe in a lot of instrumentation. So quick backstory. The four founders of BrowserStack, Ritesh and Nakul, they come from IIT Mumbai and they met together in IIT and they tried their hands at multiple startups before they stumbled on building BrowserStack with the problem statement that they were facing in building their past startups. Now, being engineers at heart, what they insisted right from the get-go is you need to have instrumentation around every single thing that you build. Even today, Nakul receives a health report in his email every morning, which tells him what is going well and what is not going well. Now, yes, because of the scale at which BrowserStack is, his focus is on different parameters or different metrics. But the thought or this idea is inculcated in everyone who works at BrowserStack. So be it Ayushi, who is the owner of Test Infra for private cloud, she also monitors the health of the private cloud devices and what the customers are doing on the devices, whether any of the customers are facing issues, what kind of performance problems are being faced. There are different metrics that we have defined. Now, it's not just the device health and uptime and performance. There are many more metrics that we have defined for all the aspects, not just the engineering, but even the business aspect, which everyone at BrowserStack are are asked to follow, and we ensure that we monitor these very in a robust way to give a very good experience to our customers. Right? So that I hopefully answered your question, that we have instrumentation for almost everything specific to your question, which gives us a very good insight on the health of the device, whether what the uptime is or the performance. In fact, BrowserStack is one of the only companies that has a status page where you can see the uptime of the product, which is a factor of availability of infra as well, right there online. And it's a real-time update, unlike a lot of companies which actually retrospectively go in and add a downtime. So we take pride in the fact that we have built amazing product with a really stable infra. The next question is, how is the reporting structure like? Is there a way to create the reports and a bug ticket with detailed logs of errors? Yes, definitely yes. So we have multiple ways in which you can bug a report, log a bug. We have integrations with common bug tracking tools as well. In fact, we have an offering called Bird, bug capture is what we call it now, which allows you to significantly reduce the effort even capturing all the data points around the issue. So it just not only captures the logs at that point in time, but it captures additional information, the screenshots, etc., and just allows you to integrate with, say, Jira or Bugzilla or any of your bug tracking tool, and helps you send that across to your team members, which dramatically reduces the debugging time that is required by any individual. And there are multiple reports as well. So we have a product called Test Observability. It is a test analytics product. It has the ability to import your reports from other sources like Allure, but it is connected to all our products, which means that your automation runs, your flakiness detection, whether there is a trend that you want to plot, that what kind of problems that you're seeing in a specific set of tests or test cases, all of that can be plotted. Now that's for faster debugging. You have reports in your test management product, which you can see at a product level. And you have reporting for executives in our quality engineering insights, where you can define your quality score uh, depending on what is critical for your organization, and create like a one panel view for your executives. So there are multiple reporting options that are available on the. The next question is, how do you detect and handle hardware failures or software crashes in real devices? That's again a good question. There's two or three different aspects here. Hardware failure, we have instrumentation, as I mentioned in as part of the earlier question, that helps us detect issues with the devices, be it a hardware failure or a software failure. So the logs that it generates and the alerts that are already configured, that helps us ensure that we are on top of the device health in terms of the hardware or software. On top of that, there are manual checks as well that we do. Now, one of the problems that are there with any device hosting or cloud-based device hosting is the device is constantly being charged and discharged. This is not what the device is meant for, which means that the battery of the devices take a toll, and we see problems like bloating of the battery. Now, this is a common problem for anyone, even if you have an in-house lab, and we have customers whom we are working with who have really big in-house labs, and they come to us asking the same question that, okay, how do you handle the battery bloat? We have checks and balances every single day, every single hour, which is done. So both instrumentation wise and manual check wise, to ensure that the devices operate in the most optimum condition. We have our internal dashboards that gives us these insights. Even the manual checks lead to data updates on the internal dashboard, which helps us keep a track of the health of the devices in all ways possible. What Next question is, what is the biggest lesson you have learned while maintaining large scale device lab? Oh, this is very close to my heart. Again, we are testing infra for the internet. We take pride in the fact that we are the largest mobile data center of the world. Like no other organization, no other competitors of BrowserStack actually have the same scale that we have. Just to quote some numbers, we have 20 plus data centers across the globe with more than 25,000 devices. It's a really, really big scale. Now, the while there is pride, the biggest lesson is that it is not easy. We need to be on our toes to ensure that we are giving the right experience. It's one thing to just put devices in a lab and make it available online. It's another thing to ensure that these devices are always up and running and working in the best condition so that the customers don't face issues. Now, there was one thing that Ayushi was mentioning about pre-configurations and scalability and stability of the devices, right? Uh, Imagine you want to run automation tests in-house with an in-house device lab. What all do you think you will have to do that? It is not just plugging those devices in and maintaining it. That is the first thing that you do, that you are able to stream the screen of a device to the end user and allow the user to interact on it. That's the least of the problems. While it's a critical and crucial problem, not easy to solve, but it's the least of the problem. What comes behind the scene is to ensure the device is always consistent. Your time zones, you would not believe there's a requirement where you have to have that same time zone always, right? For your automation script to run. You don't want to write an automation script loaded with debt, which is just setting up the infra at the start of your test. And it takes a good amount of time in just doing that. You want to focus only on writing the tests that you want to run. We are ensuring that you don't get pop-ups. We are ensuring that you get a consistent environment. And my biggest learning here is to understand every single time a new OS version is launched and every single time a new device is launched by an OEM, what exactly changed, because we want to ensure that we get to that consistency of environment for our users. That's the biggest learning. And I'm sorry, I can go on and on and talk about this because it's very close to my heart. I hope that answers your question. Right? What tool name for AI bug capturing you mentioned? We have bug capture. So you can go to our website and check out bug capture and you can find that out. But again, bug capture is one of the ways in which you can capture the bug. There are other ways as well, but bug capture is our latest offering. It's available for free to our customers. So please do check it out. That's something that will be uh, helpful for your organizations. Right? How frequently are devices rebooted or refreshed to maintain the reliability? Now, these are two different questions. The refreshed bit is something that we do with every session. Now, in my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sudeepa, uh, refreshing the device is getting it to the consistent level. So in a public cloud, when a user uses a device and releases it back to the pool, we clean it to a state where the next user can start using the device assuming it's brand new out of the box. So you don't have to worry about any residual settings, any residual data being there on the device. So from a refresh standpoint, it happens at the end of every session. For a private cloud, it's more customizable. So you can configure how you want to refresh, at what interval you want to refresh. That's there on the private cloud. On the reboot side, the reboot is not frequent. Reboot is done only as part of maintainability. It depends on device, whether it's stuck. Say there are devices at times which get stuck in certain state and we are not able to proceed ahead, or it's not available for a customer to be used. In such cases, we do reboot the devices, but those frequencies very rare. But yes, it requires a reboot. That's an OEM hardware issue that we need to solve for. Okay, how do you ensure complete isolation between test sessions on shared devices? How devices clean completely? Okay, so the second part of your question is the answer to the first question, that we clean the device to an extent where you do not have any residual setting or data. How do we clean the devices? Our IP, which I cannot share publicly, but the point is that we ensure that no data from the previous session, no settings from the previous session, nothing is passed on to the next session. So the device it's like brand new out of the box. So I know I'm not answering your question, but yes, it's part of our IP which we cannot share. Mm. How often does a mobile device will be replaced with new ones? Are the devices frequently used, the performance will not be as the new one. So again, thank you, Hari, for asking this question. It's a very good question. We ensure that we monitor. I think and feels like I'm repeating my answers to some extent. The instrumentation that we do around the devices and the host machines help us keep a check on the performance of the devices. This ensures us to know that when it hits below a certain threshold, we know that the devices is not operating optimally. Now, there is a natural progression of degradation in performance of device. And if you use your device for a period of 3 years or 4 years, you will see that natural degradation of performance where we cannot do anything. Uh, for example, the battery, it has charge cycles that it can support, the number of charge cycles it can support. And after every 20% of those charge cycles are done, you can assume the battery capacity to lower by a certain percentage points, now which varies from each OEM to OEM as to how much degradation you see. Now, that is going to happen irrespective. But because our devices are constantly plugged in, constantly being charged and discharged and used by the users, you're right that it could impact the performance. This is where our uh, instrumentation helps us because it helps us keep a track and eye on the performance of the devices. And if we see that the performance has hit below a certain threshold, we deprecate the device, we remove that and we replace them with the newer devices. Here, I think one of the important things that helps with a cloud solution like BrowserStack is you can find an older device OS combination as well at BrowserStack, something that Apple say has iOS. We are right now at iOS 18. So that you have a user who are facing a bunch of users who are facing problem with iOS 16. Now you cannot have buy a device from market on iOS 16 today unless you go to the second hand market. And again, there is no guarantee. So if you want, you can try it out on BrowserStack. Now, why I'm bringing this point up here is it's a challenge as well that if the battery or say there's a issue with the device and it's not performing optimally, we have to take a conscious call that whether we continue to retain that device on the cloud or not, because it could be a device OS combination that is no longer available in the market, but still very useful for our customers. So yes, we do replace devices where the performance is lower, but we also take a judgment call depending on the usage of those devices. Right. The next question is, do you save the session history like screen recordings, logs? Yeah. So for your automate sessions, the history is there. You can actually go to the Automate product dashboard and you can see all your past sessions. There's a standard duration for which we save, but you can always download the logs. You can download the session data. We have APIs for all of that. Live or manual testing products, they do not retain any session history as far as possible. So you can take the dump. You can ensure that you are, well, say if you're facing an issue and you log a issue or bug during the session, that will capture all the data and that's a record that you can keep. But otherwise, manual products will not retain any session history. Your automate products do retain that session history of your test sessions, your builds, etc., that you have run. But there's a limited period of time for which we retain that. Next question is, what are the key challenges in maintaining a cloud-based device lab at scale? I think I already answered this. It's maintaining, constantly ensuring that the devices are up and running and available to our customers in a consistent format with the consistency that we commit to. We also have a commitment to our customers of providing the flagship devices and OS upgrades on day zero. And even before that, like our Samsung devices, we generally make it available 5 or 6 days. This time it was 7 days before the public launch, which means that we have to constantly be on our toes to ensure that we give those devices to our customers on public cloud. And you don't pay anything extra. If you are a single user on a single license on our manual products or automate products, you get access to all the devices irrespective. So we are not packaging or getting the flagship devices out of it, or we are not saying that, oh, you'll not get access to the day zero launch devices. that are there in the market or that we make available on our platform. So uh, we we are just ensuring that we keep the devices up and running, and we keep adding newer devices and newer OSs to our repository. Right. I hope that answers your question. I don't see uh, more questions coming up. We do have 3 minutes. So, oh yeah, there's one more. How long single session can be continued for text execution? Hari, this is configurable. So by default, and Ayushi, keep me honest here, you can run a test session for a couple of hours. But beyond that, if it's configurable, you can request if your use case requires you to run a longer test session, you can opt for our enterprise plan that allows you for a longer session as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right? Is it possible to test negative scenarios like app in background killed? Yes. So there are multiple negative scenarios that you can test on a public cloud as well as private cloud. We have SIM-based testing also that you can do. I'll just take one example of interruption testing as a negative scenario that you are going through your standard user journey and you are interrupted with a notification with SMS or can you test this? Yes, you can test this. So there are multiple such scenarios. You can do offline testing. You can simulate different network conditions and so on and so forth. So there are multiple tests that you can run. Hari, I would recommend you can reach out to us or our sales organization and we can help you address your queries there. Does bug capture tool similar to new AI like Jam or Better Bugs? It is better than that. So you can try out bug capture, and obviously we welcome all the feedback that you can share. So more than happy to do that. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day ahead.
It was a very insightful session, even for us, with your questions and with your poll answers. I hope you found the session useful. Thank you so much.